Jack Finnegan's sudden reappearance in Los Angeles wasn't announced with a grand entrance or public fanfare. It was silent, calculated, strategic. The kind of move that only Jack could make after years of hiding secrets, burying sins, and pretending the past was neatly locked away. He didn't head straight to Forrester Creations or make a call to his son Finn. Instead, he sought out Lee and Poppy, to women who knew more than anyone what that past really contained. To women whose lives were shaped and shattered by one reckless decision. Jack had returned not just to reveal the truth, but to detonate it. In a cold, sterile room filled with tension, Jack dropped a folder onto the table between them. No small talk. No warm reunions. Just results. The truth. DNA test results that confirmed what had long been whispered but never confirmed. Luna was his daughter. His? Not some vague mistake from Poppy's past. Not the product of a fleeting affair with a faceless man. Jack Finnegan was Luna's biological father, and the evidence was irrefutable. The twist. The blood match with Finn. An exact match. Because Finn, long believed to be Lee's adopted son, was not adopted at all. He was Jack's biological child, too. A second betrayal. A second life created in silence and secrecy. Poppy crumbled. Her carefully curated version of the past shattered in seconds. The walls she had built, the lies she had polished into half-truths, the web she'd spun to protect her daughter from the shame of being the result of an affair with her sister's husband gone. She had buried that secret so deep she thought it would never surface. But Jack dragged it back into the light with no hesitation, no remorse. And now, the man who had once promised her discretion, who had begged her to keep quiet, had flipped the script. He wasn't running from the past anymore. He was using it. Lee, on the other hand, didn't collapse. She exploded. Decades of silent suffering, of sacrifice, of being the one to pick up the pieces of Jack's messes came flooding to the surface. Her marriage had been a lie. Her motherhood was built on deception. The very foundation of her family, her pride in Finn, her identity as his protector, was scorched beyond recognition. And it wasn't just Jack's betrayal. It was Poppy's too. Her sister. Her blood. Lee had welcomed Luna into her life with cautious suspicion, but nothing could have prepared her for this. For the truth that Luna wasn't just her niece, but her husband's daughter. That Finn and Luna weren't cousins, they were half-siblings. The ramifications hit harder than any slap or scream. Finn's entire life had been built on the belief that he was adopted, that Jack and Lee had chosen him, loved him, raised him in a bubble of purpose. But the bubble had burst, and Luna, who had only just begun to find her footing in the Forrester world, was now ground zero for a scandal no one saw coming. Jack laid out his terms like a businessman making an ultimatum, not a father begging for forgiveness. His solution was simple. Luna had to leave. If Luna stayed in LA, the scandal would destroy Finn's reputation. A world-class doctor with a hidden past full of lies, incestuous connections, and a sister he didn't know he had. That wasn't the kind of story the hospital board would tolerate. That wasn't the kind of past Finn's career could survive. Jack made it clear his concern wasn't for Luna's dreams or Poppy's heartbreak. It was about damage control, about saving Finn from the consequences of his own father's sins. Poppy was speechless, trembling with shame and rage. But it was Lee who stood and faced Jack head-on, her fury radiating from every word. How dare he reappear after all these years, drop this bomb, and pretend it was all solvable with a plane ticket? How dare he treat Luna like a mistake to be erased instead of a daughter who had already suffered enough confusion about her place in this world? Jack tried to justify it, to explain that it wasn't about blame, it was about protection. But there was no salvaging the situation. Not in Lee's eyes. Not when every piece of her life had been rewritten in blood she didn't choose and lies she didn't tell. Steffi was the last to learn the truth, and when she did, the fallout was immediate. The cracks in her marriage, once invisible, now splintered in every direction. How could she look at Finn the same way again? How could she process the fact that the woman who had become her assistant, the sweet, quirky Luna she had grown to trust, was her husband's half-sister. The betrayal wasn't just in the bloodline as it was in the silence. Finn hadn't known, but that didn't stop the damage. The trust was ruptured. And in Steffi's world, trust was everything. Finn tried to hold it together, but his internal world was collapsing. The man who had raised him, the man he had called Dad, had lied to him for his entire life. His identity, his family, his relationship with Luna, even the choices he'd made about his future, they were all tangled in this monstrous knot of betrayal and deceit. And now, he had to figure out who he was all over again. Jack didn't back down. He said what he came to say, issued his warning, and walked away. But his presence left a crater in the lives of everyone he touched. Lee was broken, her faith in her family destroyed. Poppy was a ghost of the woman she had been just days earlier. Luna, devastated and stunned, stood on the edge of everything she had built in Los Angeles, wondering if it would all be taken from her before she even had a chance to claim it. And Finn was silent, numb, lost. The implications of Jack's return were catastrophic. This wasn't just a scandal. It was a legacy-shattering revelation. A ticking time bomb that would not only upend relationships, but potentially fracture the Forrester family forever. Because secrets like these don't just fatally ignite. And once the flames catch, they consume everything in their path. Ridge, still recovering from his own coma and emotional wreckage, was in no position to clean up this mess. Brooke tried to reach out, tried to be the voice of reason, but no one wanted reason. Not now. Not when everything they thought they knew had been exposed as a lie. Not when DNA had torn apart the very notion of who belonged to whom. The Forresters had weathered many storms, affairs, betrayals, death, resurrections. But this was different. This was blood. Unchangeable. Unforgivable. And as the days passed and the fallout grew, one thing became clear. Jack hadn't just come back to reveal the truth. He came to control it, to spin it, to weaponize it. And unless someone stopped him, he would continue to manipulate the narrative to serve his agenda. He wasn't a grieving father or a remorseful husband. He was a man trying to rewrite his legacy. But in doing so, he had detonated the truth and left everyone else to crawl through the wreckage. The question now wasn't whether Luna would leave. It was whether anyone would ever recover from the truth Jack had dragged out of the shadows. Lee Finnegan knew from the moment Jack stepped foot back in Los Angeles that the past was no longer content to stay buried. But what she hadn't anticipated was just how quickly everything would spiral out of control. The DNA revelation had been earth-shattering. Luna was Jack's daughter, and through that tangled bloodline, Luna and Finn were half-siblings. That alone could have detonated the delicate world they'd all been trying to protect. But Jack wasn't finished. He had returned not just with truth, but with leverage. And now Lee was watching everything she built her career, her reputation, her family begin to collapse under the weight of secrets she'd spent decades hiding. In a desperate bid to contain the fallout, Lee acted fast. She moved quietly, swiftly covertly accessing the hospital's digital record system to lock down anything connected to Finn's early medical files. Her goal wasn't malicious. It was damage control. The last thing she could allow was for the hospital to discover any overlap between Finn and Luna's histories, any strange coincidences or markers that could trigger deeper investigation. In her mind, she was still protecting her son. But tampering with records even with good intentions was a line no medical professional should ever cross. And she knew it. That was the risk. And Jack knew it, too. Jack had predicted every move. He knew Lee's instincts better than anyone, because he'd watched her maneuver through chaos before back when she first helped cover up Finn's true parentage. So when Lee moved to conceal the records, Jack was ready. He didn't just confront her, weaponized her own past against her. Producing an archived medical report from years ago, Jack pointed out timestamps and appointment logs that had been manually altered. There, in black and white, was proof that Lee had adjusted Finn's birth records and early evaluations to match the false narrative of his adoption. It wasn't just a breach of hospital protocol, it was a potential felony. Finn walked in on the confrontation at exactly the wrong moment or the perfect one, depending on how you saw it. He stood silently in the doorway, listening, frozen, as Jack revealed the truth, that Lee had orchestrated a web of medical lies to keep Finn from ever learning that Jack was his biological father. The timeline, the adjusted dates, the forged signature st were all laid out like evidence in a courtroom. And Lee had no more defenses. Finn looked at his parency to people he had trusted more than anyone else in the world and saw only betrayal. The shock hit him like a wave. He hadn't just been kept in the dark. He had been manipulated, gaslit, and protected by lies so carefully crafted that they had become indistinguishable from reality. Everything he believed about himself, his family, and his origins was gone. Worse than the betrayal was the realization that it hadn't been one mistake. It had been years of conscious deception from both of them. The betrayal wasn't just Jack's affair with Poppy, it was Lee's decades-long silence and calculated cover-up. Finn's foundation cracked in that instant, and it didn't stop there. Word spread faster than anyone could contain it. Someone inside the hospital administration caught wind of the irregularities in Finn's medical records. An internal audit was launched, and within days, Lee was summoned to a hearing before the hospital's Board of Ethics. It wasn't just her position as chief of surgery on the line. It was her medical license, her entire career. And if the board chose to expand the investigation to include Finn, who had benefited from the false records and potentially treated patients under false pretenses, it could cost him everything too. The day of the hospital hearing arrived with a sense of doom hanging in the air. The board convened in private chambers, but the impact would be public. Rumors of scandal, nepotism, and ethical violations had already begun to leak to local media. Finn and Lee, once seen as the hospital's gold standard power duo, a brilliant son raised by a principal doctor, were now under a microscope. Every success they'd achieved, every accolade, was now being re-examined in the context of this unfolding family implosion. Jack saw the moment for what it was: leverage. He approached Luna with one final, cold ultimatum. If she truly loved Finn, she would leave town, disappear quietly, take the stain of their shared bloodline with her, and allow the scandal to die. Jack made it clear that if Luna stayed, the hearing would only get uglier. He would not hesitate to let the full truth about Finn and Lee's deceit come to light. He would destroy every shred of credibility Finn had left simply to save face and protect his own image. Luna, already devastated by the fallout of her parentage, now faced the unthinkable, sacrificing her own life in LA, her budding career, her relationships, everything she had built, just to shield Finn from consequences that weren't even her fault. Luna stood silent, caught in a nightmare of someone else's making. She wasn't the one who lied, but she was the one Jack now demanded should pay the price. And the worst part was, he knew he might be right. Because even if she stayed, the whispers wouldn't stop. The Forrester circle was already starting to turn against her. Steffi, still reeling from the revelation that Luna was her husband's half-sister, had pulled back. Conversations had grown colder. Doors that had once been open to her were now closing one by one. Finn tried to shield Luna from the pressure, but he was unraveling too. His trust in both parents had been obliterated. The respect he'd always held for Lee as a symbol of integrity and strength had been replaced with confusion and anger. And with Jack, there was nothing left to salvage. The man who had lied about fatherhood, then used that truth as a weapon, could never again be trusted. Finn stood at the center of a collapsing university, his career, his marriage, his family, all spinning out of control. At the ethics hearing, the room was silent as Lee gave her statement. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled. She didn't deny the alterations. She didn't try to deflect blame. She simply stated the truth, that she had done it to protect her son from the shame of his origins, to give him a life free of scandal, and that she now understood the damage those decisions had caused. The board listened, impassive, as Jack's evidence was reviewed and debated. Every second dragged like a blade. The verdict wouldn't come that day. The board needed time to review the full extent of the record tampering and decide whether it warranted disciplinary action, suspension, or full termination. But the damage was already done. Her medical legacy was in jeopardy. Her son's career was dangling by a thread. And her family was fractured beyond recognition. Back at Forrester Creations, the ripple effects continued. Steffi confronted Finn about the growing scandal, and while she tried to be supportive, the tension was undeniable. She had spent years fighting for stability, for a life without drama, for a marriage built on trust. But now the truth was staring her in the face. Finn had a past he didn't know, a family he couldn't control, and a future that might be shaped by decisions he never made. The Forrester name, so carefully guarded and protected, was now linked to a scandal that could erupt into full-blown public disgrace. And Luna, caught between a mother who lied, a father who manipulated, and a half-brother whose life might be ruined by her very presence, began to pack her bags. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't have the strength. She just wrote a letter, left it on Finn's desk, and walked out into the night, leaving behind everything she had come to love. Whether it was permanent or temporary, she didn't know. All she knew was that her existence had become a liability and that someone had to end the damage. In the end, Jack got what he wanted. The scandal was superset for now. Finn's career, though bruised, was still intact. Lee's future remained uncertain, but the family was broken. Trust was shattered, and the cost of truth had been paid in silence, exile, and pain. Jack Finnegan moved like a man who had done this before quietly, without drawing attention, and always 2 steps ahead of anyone who might try to stop him. He booked the red-eye out of LAX under a name no one would recognize. One way for now, with a return option only if circumstances allowed. Luna had no idea where she was going, only that it would be far away from Los Angeles. Jack told her it was for her own good, that staying meant being dragged into something far worse than DNA scandals and hospital hearings. Someone, he said, was digging into Poppy's past. Someone who wasn't just curious, but vindictive. Someone who knew how to weaponize the kind of secrets that didn't just destroy reputation, she buried them. Jack wouldn't say who, but the urgency in his voice made Luna follow him into the car without protest. Jack didn't explain much on the ride to the airport. He just stared out the window, jaw tight, eyes cold. Luna sat beside him, numb. The last few weeks had turned her world inside out. Finding out that Jack was her biological father, learning that Finn was her half-brother. Watching the ripple effects destroy her relationship with RJ and shatter her sense of belonging at Forrester had been relentless. Now Jack was saying this was the only way out. That leaving town was the only way to protect her mother. And Finn. And herself. Jack made it sound like a sacrifice, but Luna couldn't shake the feeling that it was also a cover-up. That if she boarded that plane, she might be disappearing for more reasons than one. Meanwhile, back in Los Angeles, RJ Forrester couldn't sleep. Something felt off. He hadn't seen or heard from Luna in nearly a day, and Poppy had been cagey in every conversation. Jack had come and gone from the Forrester building like a ghost, and something about the silence surrounding Luna's whereabouts was deafening. He knew Jack was behind it. Steffi knew it too. The two of them, once wary of one another, found themselves united by the same uneasy suspicion that Jack Finnegan was orchestrating something, and Luna was at the center of it. RJ used his connection at the security desk to find out when Jack had left and where he'd gone. Steffi leaned on a Forrester chauffeur who occasionally did side work for Jack. With a few well-placed questions and some subtle pressure, they learned the destination, LAX. Jack was headed for the private terminal, and he wasn't going alone. They raced to the airport, keeping their presence quiet. No calls, no texts. If they tipped Jack off, they'd never get close. By the time they reached the terminal, the private jet was already being prepped for departure. The driver confirmed the flight was scheduled to leave within the hour. RJ and Steffi slipped past the waiting area, moving fast but unnoticed, until they spotted her Luna, standing with a suitcase at her feet, looking out the glass at the tarmac, a hollow expression on her face. Jack stood just a few feet away, speaking urgently into his phone, pacing like a man trying to outmaneuver fate. This wasn't a trip. This was an escape. RJ called her name. Luna turned, stunned. She hadn't expected anyone to find her, let alone him. Her breath caught in her throat. In his eyes, she saw the hurt, the confusion, but also the defiance. She didn't speak. Not yet. Jack saw RJ and Steffi moments later and hung up instantly. His face tightened. His plan was unraveling. RJ stepped between Luna and the boarding gate. "You don't have to go," he said, low and fierce. "Whatever this is, whatever he's telling you, it doesn't have to end this way." Luna hesitated. Jack stepped forward, voice sharp. "She does. You don't understand what's at stake here." Steffi's voice cut through, cold and unflinching. "Then make us understand, Jack. Because I'm not letting my husband's half-sister vanish in the middle of the night while you pretend this is about protecting Finn. What are you really running from?" Jack's eyes flickered. For a moment, it looked like he might deny it. But then he sighed. He was cornered. And the only thing left to do was confess. "Years ago," Jack began, "when I made the deal with Poppy to keep quiet about Luna, I knew it wouldn't be enough. There was someone else involved. Someone who helped cover the paper trail, falsified clinic records, moved money, ensured that the trail went cold. It was a dirty deal. A trade. In exchange, I owed him. I thought he'd never collect." Jack's voice dropped, quieter now, but laced with dread. "But he is. He wants something now. And if he doesn't get it, he's going to expose everything, not just about Luna, but about Poppy. About what happened before Luna was born." Poppy, who had arrived breathless moments earlier, stepped forward. "No," she said, shaking. "No, Jack. You don't get to speak for me." Her eyes locked with Luna's. "There are things you don't know. Things I've kept hidden because I was ashamed. Because I thought burying them would keep you safe. But if you leave now, if you get on that plane, those secrets will never come to light. And I'll spend the rest of my life living in fear of what might happen if they do." Jack's voice hardened. "Poppy, don't." But she didn't stop. "There was a man," she said, her voice trembling. "Before I met Jack. Before I knew I was pregnant. Someone I worked for. Someone powerful. Hurt people. He hurt me. And I ran. I never told anyone. Jack helped me cover it up. But it was never just about Luna. It was about survival. If this man finds out Luna's still here, he might come after her. And he won't care about right or wrong. He'll only care that we broke the deal." Silence fell like a hammer. Luna stared at her mother, eyes wide. "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered. "Why did you let me believe all this time that I was just a mistake? That it was about shame? I thought it would protect you," Poppy said. "But I was wrong." RJ turned to Luna. "You don't have to be afraid. Not of him. Not of the past. Whatever it is, we'll face it." Together, Jack stepped in again, frustration simmering just beneath the surface. If she stays, Finn's name gets dragged into the mud. The hospital scandal. That's just the beginning. This man knows where to hit. He'll go after the licenses. The board. He'll make sure Finn is ruined before he can recover. Do you want that on your conscience? Luna's chest rose and fell, her breath shallow. The plane crew was calling final boarding. Everything was waiting on her. One step forward, and she vanished into silence, into anonymity, into safety, or so they claimed. One step back, and she opened the door to every buried secret, every haunting threat, every painful truth that had been left to rot in the dark. She looked at RJ, at Steffi, at Poppy, then finally at Jack. "No," she said quietly. "I'm not running. I'm not disappearing so you can keep pretending this is about protecting Finn. You made deals. You buried lies. You chose control over truth. I won't." Jack tried again. "Luna," she shook her head. "You made me believe I was the problem. that I needed to vanish so everyone else could breathe easier. But the truth is, I've done nothing wrong. I didn't choose how I was born. I didn't choose your secrets. But I can choose this. I'm staying. If there's a storm coming, I'll face it. But not alone. Jack didn't speak. He didn't move. The boarding gate closed. The plane left without her. Luna stood rooted in place, trembling but unbroken. Poppy reached for her daughter's hand, and for the first time in years, Luna didn't pull away. RJ stepped beside her. Steffi remained close, silent but no longer distant. The past wasn't finished with them, not by a long shot, but for now, the truth had won. The darkness Jack had tried to bury had been pulled into the light, and Luna was still standing. Whatever came next, she would face it. Not as someone's secret, not as someone's liability, but as Luna knows a one afraid and hidden and ready for the storm.